By the 1950s, the classic era of the Universal Studios monsters was over. There was still Creature from the Black Lagoon and its sequels to come, but the series really peaked with 1948's Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. In it, the monsters are petrified into their final, archetypal kitsch forms, as they play straight men to the comedy duo. It is a fun movie and one of my favorites of the Universal Monster series, but it was a fun epitaph. There would be a few more Abbott and Costello meets movies after this. Meet the Killer Boris Karloff, Meet Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Meet the Invisible Man, and Meet the Mummy. But the future would belong to the monsters of science fiction's atomic age. Alien invaders, the creature from the Black Lagoon, the Fly, them, the Incredible Shrinking Man, the 50-Foot Woman, and of course, Godzilla. But just as these gothic monsters were shambling off to the grave, they came back from the dead. Universal made the brilliant move of licensing out their antiquated movies for airing on the burgeoning medium of television. Shock Theater debuted in 1957 and was quickly supplemented with the antics of horror hosts like Vampira, Zachary, and Tarantula Ghoul. This, and the equally new medium of drive-in theaters, brought the classic monsters to a whole new generation. Children born in the post-war boom met Dracula, Frankenstein, the Wolfman, and King Kong again, not so much as spine-chilling horrors, but as cool ghouls. Their popularity exploded as they became part of hip youth culture. Baby boomers became monster kids. Suddenly, monsters were everywhere. In 1958, the iconic magazine Famous Monsters of Filmland debuted and became the standard bearer of the Monster Kids for the next 2 decades. Its inaugural cover dressed Frankenstein up like Hugh Hefner, illustrating one of the many cultural cross-pollinations of everything hip. England's Hammer Studios had already been remaking Universal horrors through the 50s, starring the likes of Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, but kids down at the American drive-in might have been more familiar with the films of Roger Corman. With American International Pictures, well known for their Beach Blanket and Hot Rod movies, Corman directed a string of Edgar Allan Poe adaptations starring Vincent Price. Bobby Boris Pickett released The Monster Mash in 1962, which provided a Halloween anthem and a pretty hilarious satire of 50s and 60s pop music. The Munsters and the Addams Family debuted on TV in 1964, bringing monsters into the television sitcom format. Rankin Bass, best known for their stop-motion holiday specials like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and Year Without a Santa Claus, brought Mad Monster Party to cinemas in 1967. This film united all the classics together in a zinging monster mash, heavily influenced by Mad magazine, with a script by Mad's Harvey Kurtzman and character designs by Jack Davis, not to mention a soundtrack that could just as easily have come from a James Bond movie. Disney got into the act with the opening of the Haunted Mansion in 1969. Even the breakfast aisle was not safe from monsters. Count Chocula and Frankenberry first materialized in 1971. Another standard bearer for the Monster Kids was Aurora Plastics. Mostly producers of military model kits, someone working there got the bright idea of making a model kit of the Frankenstein monster. That guy was nearly booed out of the building. After all, what kind of sicko would want the Frankenstein monster leering at them from their dresser? But when a pair of kids oogled a prototype at a toy trade show, the orders came pouring in. Aurora Plastics would have to keep factories running 24 hours around the clock to meet demand. That was in January 1962, and by Christmas of the same year, Dracula and Wolfman joined Frankenstein on store shelves. By 1965, the line had been filled out by The Mummy, The Creature, The Phantom of the Opera, Hunchback of Notre Dame, Godzilla, King Kong, Mr. Hyde, The Bride of Frankenstein, and The Witch. Aurora Models were closely aligned with Famous Monsters of Filmland from the beginning, including a model contest which had King Kong grace the front cover. So it was only unnatural that in 1966, Aurora unveiled an official Famous Monsters model called the Forgotten Prisoner of Castle Mare. Aurora also tried to cash in on the connection between monsters and hot rod culture. You had drive-in theaters, of course, and Ed Big Daddy Ross gross-out Rat Fink characters. So starting in 1964, Aurora produced a series of monster racer models. Dracula's Dragster, Frankenstein's Flivver, Wolfman's Wagon, Mummy's Chariot, Godzilla's Go-Kart, and King Kong's Thronester. The Godzilla kit didn't last long, though. Toho Studios felt that this silly kit was beneath the dignity of their monster. Too bad they didn't feel that way about some of Godzilla's movies. As time went on, Aurora attempted to goose sales by producing the figures with glow-in-the-dark parts, and eventually adding a new line of monster scenes models, including Dr. Deadly, a giant insect, a scantily clad victim, Vampira, a pain parlor, and a new sculpt of Frankenstein carrying a nubile and half-naked damsel, much to the chagrin of parents. James Bama's box art catapulted him into the Mount Rushmore of monster artists, alongside famous monsters cover artist Basil Gogos. Today, the boxes are as desirable as the models themselves. It might seem odd that King Kong was dragged along for this ride. As originally conceived and executed, King Kong was a jungle adventure film, more in the vein of Tarzan the Ape Man than Dracula. Nevertheless, Kong is widely considered a universal monster in effect, if not in fact. Not a gothic horror, but the original king of monsters. Horror hostess Tarantula Ghoul released the pop rock single King Kong in 1958, and a proxy for him appeared in Mad Monster Party. Kong ended up on the cover of Famous Monsters multiple times. King Kong was a big enough film in 1933 that it sold out the Roxy and Radio City Music Hall in New York simultaneously, and when it debuted on a New York TV station in the 50s, it was aired 16 times in 7 days. Famous Monster speculated that more people saw the film in that week than in the preceding 20-some-odd years. Whatever happened to Fay Wray was the question asked in the Rocky Horror Show stage production in 1973 and the Rocky Horror Picture Show feature film in 1975. King Kong was truly iconic, leading Aurora Plastics to produce its 2 model kits. And here is my first of the 2 models. I actually started with the second one. I started with King Kong's Thronester, and that's what got me going on this whole kick with the Aurora models, and in fact, model making in general. Because I never really got into making models, but I did find this pre-built, pre-owned in a vintage shop. And I thought, that's great. This is a great addition to my King Kong collection. This neat King Kong piece, and it's already made, already built, already painted, so I don't have to do anything. I can just pick it up and bring it home. But that lasted all of about an hour before I just kind of sat there and looked at it and thought, you know what? I can do a better job than the person who owned this before. In fact, I can make this into something a little more properly King Kong, a little more evocative of the actual King Kong. So you can see on the box here, we've got James Bama's beautiful, vintage retro art showing King Kong's Thronester with these, pretty wicked 60s sort of colors and these sort of weird ersatz 60s sort of embellishments, like this weird cat head thing and this weird headlight thing. I thought, as cool as those are, I can make this model more evocative of King Kong. Now, I would never think to do that with an original Aurora model, and this is not an original. This one is a remake, a reissue by Polar Lights, which is part of Playing Mantis. Aurora folded as a company in the 70s. They got bought out, and their molds for their models were distributed to other companies, picked up by other companies, and they get reissued periodically as modern companies are able to get the rights to different characters that were represented by the original Aurora models. So this one is actually the Polar Lights reissue. So I felt a little bit better about customizing it. Still difficult though, because I'm very much from like a toy collector background insofar as I like official merchandise. I'm not as big a fan of sort of fan-made merchandise and custom merchandise and so on. I made a custom Herbie Transformer because you can't get an official Herbie Transformer, but if they ever did do that, I would go out and buy it right away. Um, I like the official merchandise for whatever weird reason. But the whole point of models, the fun of them, right, is supposed to be able to customize them and soup them up and trick them out and make them what you want. So I kind of got over myself and decided I was going to do that. I was going to improve on this model and customize it in ways that I thought were more evocative of King Kong. I added detail and painted up King Kong to make him look better. I found a Styracosaurus toy at a thrift store and cut off its head and painted that and mounted it on the front here. Of course, if you're a Kong fan, which presumably you are if you're watching this or watching my videos, you know the history of Styracosaurus in King Kong. Supposed to be in the original movie, and in fact, it's Styracosaurus that is preventing the sailors from getting back off the log when Kong attacks them and drops them off of it. But that scene was cut, and then the Styracosaurus model was reused for Son of Kong in the sequel. So I added that on there. I added some tikis in place of those weird cat head things, because, sort of a South Pacific island, giant thing, whatever, giant monster thing. It's a little more evocative of tiki to me than weird cat head things. So I added those on there, and those come from some swizzle sticks that a friend of mine gave me who collects vintage tiki things. And those swizzle sticks are from an old tiki restaurant that used to be here in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Not anymore. Um, oh no, he's destroying vintage swizzle sticks. Don't worry, I got like a box full of these things, so they're fine. They're fine. Show you the back here as well. There's this spider. That's actually original to the model, but I sort of fixed that up a bit, added some iridescent black paint, and I added this plane onto the back, which is an idea shamelessly stolen from another YouTuber. If you look it up, there's another video about King Kong's Thronester out there, where the model builder actually added a biplane onto the back of the Thronester, chasing down Kong. So I plagiarized that idea and supplemented it with these sort of bullet hole designs that I've added on here. I didn't go the full route of like poking actual holes into the model or anything. Those are just painted on there. Um, but sort of to go with the idea, oh yeah, the biplanes are chasing King Kong, 'cause of course they are. I did repaint the body of the model here. The original owner had done this in sort of a mica flecked orange. No, this is supposed to be a throne, right? So it should be gold. So went with the glossy black dashboard and the gold for the actual throne. Putting the silver details are actually silver Sharpie in there. Added those in there, and then the biggest thing, of course, are the girls. I found on Facebook Marketplace these HO scale girl figures from Prizer, meant for railways. I'm using them for Kong here because, of course, Kong is a notorious ladies' man. So I added those girls on there. Sorry, the light is kind of washing them out a bit. But had those, and of course, his special girl, and Darrow Fay Ray, hanging out there on his shoulder. So taking that original model idea, the reissue by Polar Lights, and customizing it to make it more evocative of King Kong and recalling things that are actually in the King Kong movie, right? The biplane, the tikis for the island theme, and the pinup girls that would be flocking to Kong because he is again such a ladies' man. Then we have this reissue of the original King Kong model that Aurora made. Now, this reissue comes from Atlantis, and this is actually the glow in the dark version of Kong. So, Aurora, like I mentioned in the opening narration, uh, as time went on and everybody who wanted to buy the monster models bought them, sales are starting to flag. So Aurora's trying to think of how do we goose our sales a bit here, and they came up with the idea of making these with glow-in-the-dark parts. Heads, feet, that sort of thing, casting glow-in-the-dark plastic. And that has been reissued by Atlantis, who also replicated, this is hard to do, replicated the square box that Aurora also shifted to, away from the long box, which you saw replicated with the Thronester. The long boxes were the original. The square boxes were the reissued ones, the glow in the dark ones. So it comes in that box, and yeah, I decided I wanted to keep as much of the glow in the dark stuff within reason. Like his entire head was glow in the dark. I didn't want to use that, but I did keep the eyes, the teeth, the girl, some of the little lizards and things that came with it underneath there, and the nameplate as well. Not that my camera caught some of that, apparently. So it's a little hard to see. Let's do that again. So yeah, there we can see the nameplate now is looking pretty good there. Again, silver Sharpie. Now this one, silver Sharpie for some of those details there, like on the nameplate. How I painted this is I wanted to go with a silver screen edition of King Kong. I decided to bypass the whole trying to use like actual colors and paint them to look whatever realistic and paint the ground to look realistic and that sort of thing. I decided I wanted like a black and white silver screen King Kong. So that's what I went with. So this is all painted in black, different shades of gray and white in here. The trees are customized. Most of this figure is, or this model is original except for those trees. I didn't like the trees that the original model came with. They were just like these little dinky, little piddly things, which to me didn't really convey the size of Kong. The largest tree in there isn't any larger than the little Fay Ray figure there. So I ordered these trees off of eBay and glued them down with, of course, Gorilla Glue, which most modelers don't advise, but it's Gorilla Glue. I'm doing a Kong model, so come on, of course I'm going to use it. And yeah, I had to paint those up, which was challenging because they actually came in their proper green and brown, that sort of thing. But basically every single one of these is mounted into a hole that was in the model for the trees that it actually came with, which I'm now keeping in the box because I keep everything. So keeping as much of the parts as possible. This also is reissued with the original instructions because why improve on perfection? And yeah, so this is the this is it. This is the guy. I also, just for funsies, picked up this, which is a retro Stegosaur model by Tamiya. So different company. Tamiya produces these very retro-looking dinosaur models. I thought that retro-looking dinosaur is perfect to go with my King Kong. I just need to find a good base for him, really, is all. That sort of works with that, and I can use some of the extra trees that I got with my package to dress that up and have them fit a little bit better in with Kong here. There are other editions available as well, because of course there's always a cottage industry of customizers and whatnot. So you can actually order from Cultman TV. You can order a replacement head that more closely resembles the actual stop motion model from 1933. And there's also an add-on kit you can get of the sort of ceremonial platform that Kong grabs Fay Ray from. If you want to, I might eventually someday get the ceremonial thing, but I'm not really chomping at the bit because I have now run out of space on my Kong shelf with the Thronester and with this guy, and even with this guy here. I don't have any room left, so I'll have to figure out what to do for that. In the meantime, I guess that means my Kong collecting is kind of gonna cool it a little bit. I put out sort of a new thing every month here, but I don't got any more space. But in the meantime, this is a nice piece to add in there, which I really wanted. Once I got that Thronester and actually started looking into the Aurora models, it's like, wow, I want that piece because it's got a neat history to it. There's lots of King Kong models out there, most of which are very expensive, which I'd love to get, but this one was sort of more imperative, and I went looking all over the city for this one, because it's got that Aurora history, it's got that Monster Kid history, it's got that sort of that neat story behind it, and that's what I'm liking with my Kong stuff is I want unique, interesting things that have stories behind them. I mean, the NECA figures are great, and I love them, and the Mezco figure is great. Oh, the Mezco figure does have a story behind it. Did a whole video on that. So I'm not going to pass up just like a nice Kong figure, but I'm more interested in unique, interesting, strange things like the Thronester, things with history like the Aurora model. Um, so yeah, that's sort of a good high point to, I guess, end my immediate phase of Kong collecting. Undoubtedly, I will find more stuff as more stuff becomes available. I'm actually on the lookout now for a Tramp Steamer model. And I don't know if anybody actually makes them, but stuff that evokes Kong. The Stegosaurus isn't an official piece of Kong merchandise, but it fits with the collection. It has a place in King Kong history. So I'm interested in getting a Tramp Steamer model as well, because that's the ship, the Venture or the Wanderer, whichever version, the book version or the movie version. Um, Still want the King Kong Barbie, but we'll see if I ever manage to get that. Um, and otherwise, though, I'm actually interested in branching. Now that I've got a taste for model making, I actually want to branch out a little bit and get a few other models. I want to get that Lost Prisoner of Castlemare because it's got that famous Monsters of Filmland story behind it. And Aurora also did a Zorro model, a Disney Zorro model. I'm actually a big Zorro fan as well, so I'm interested in picking that one up and actually painting it to look bronze. So like a bronze statue. I can put it in my living room, and it's not just like this weird plastic model, right? But we'll see. There's also MPC, I think it is, did some Pirates of the Caribbean official tie-in models that are no longer branded Pirates of the Caribbean, but have been otherwise reissued. So lots of stuff out there. We'll see how much of the model bug I catch. This is not a cheap hobby anymore. Originally, adjusted for inflation, this guy would have cost about $8 in today's money. It did not cost that anymore. This cost me like $60 Canadian to pick up this. So models are not a cheap hobby anymore, like they were back in the 50s and 60s and 70s when Aurora was originally doing their thing. But that's okay. I'm getting used to the fact that there is nothing in my King Kong collection that cost me less than $60. Anyway, so yeah, there we go. That is the history of the Aurora monster models and their relationship with King Kong and the important place that they had uh, in the history of monster fandom.